Hello, my name's Carole. This is my channel, So Carole. How do you fancy making a fun little project? You know, when you go into your sewing room and you don't want to start anything big or major, you just want to play around with some fabric and thread, and you've got a few fat quarters lying around. Well, how about making one of these tissue holders? I designed this for my glove box primarily, but you could put them in a rucksack or whatever. But I prefer grab and go tissues. So obviously you can't fit a box of tissues in the glove box. I don't know if any of you have tried to, but it always gets crushed. So this is what I made a long time ago now, but I've just revamped them into a much prettier version. So yeah, it's a fun little project. It won't take you very long. There's a couple of options to make it slightly more complicated if you wanted to, or you can just keep it simple, but I will tell you. So yeah, why not have a go? I'm going to refer to all the measurements in inches, and I know I'm in the UK, but I was born in the 60s, and we've got a generation of people that kind of fight between inches and the imperial system, metric system. And I'm finding these days it's actually easier to see inches, work in inches. So yeah, have a go. It's great fun and it won't take you very long. I will say a lot of you quilters out there love measuring things. I, however, only like measuring things once. And if I know I'm going to make more than one item, I actually draw it out on pattern paper. So I've only measured it once, cut it out once, and then I can use pattern pieces. I just find it easier that way. I don't know if you do too, but if you know you're going to make something more than once, you don't want to measure it all out every time. So thanks for joining me, and I really hope you enjoy this sew along. I have my pieces all laid, cut and laid out here, but I'll tell you what they are. You want one 10-inch by 6-inch out of the main fabric. You want two 10-inch by 4-inch out of the main fabric for the tops. So those are those there. Out of the contrasting fabric, the fabric that's going to be underneath, you want a 10 by 7-inch rectangle. You want two 10 by 4 inches, the same as these pieces here, two of those. And you need two binding strips. I would say about 10.5-inch by 2-inch, or your favourite size, however you like to do binding. But I've done just the 2-inch, this size. So those are the pieces you need. So you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of the contrasting and 1, 2, 3 of the main fabric. Also, obviously, I've got some thread. I've got some amazing orange thread for this one. You can see I've marked my contrasting fabric with the black dots. Now I use these sticky dots all the time on my sewing to show which is the right size. I find them really great. You can get them anywhere. You just stick them on, and you know, obviously it's not going to matter with this, but sometimes it does matter, and I just automatically plonk them on the right sides. That's obvious, so that's not a problem. But if I'm using something with a solid colour, I always plonk my dots on so I know which is the right size up. So that's how we start. I'm going to put the biggest bits of fabric to one side at the moment because we don't want them. What we need is our two rectangles, the smaller rectangles, and our binding strips. Now, with this one I didn't line the back. So the front is double lined, because obviously of the contrasting bit, but I didn't line the back. So I've actually decided, you can do it or not, it's entirely up to you, but for this one I'm going to see how it works out. So this is going to be double layered as in the front. So you've got the 4 pieces. So the first stage is to make the binding strips. Now obviously they don't need to be cut on the bias because they are going to be straight. So all I'm going to do is go to the iron and press those in half. Right, so what we're going to do, we're going to put wrong sides together and we're going to assemble these two. So these will be the back pieces here. That's what we're working on at the moment. So wrong sides together, those two like that. And then what we're going to do is attach a binding strip onto the wrong sides. So you see I've got my right side sticker, but I can always peel that off later. And I'm going to attach them. And as you can see, I've got you to cut them slightly longer, just in case it moves when you're sewing it. Now you can pin these or clip them, but I'm just going to take them to machine, and I'm going to sew 1/4 inch all the way along here. Now obviously if yours has got a certain pattern on your contrasting fabric, then you're going to have to think about which way up they go. So you would have one on there and one on the bottom, but I haven't, and I'm not going to worry, so I'm going to go and sew 1/4 inch on the top there. I've sewn along the right sides. Now what I'm going to do is flip these over. I'll press them on the machine. Obviously I'm going to remove that dot, get rid of that one, and I can remove that dot as well now because I know which is the right side. So I'm going to flip those up. Now you can trim this back. I do like to do that actually. I like to get my pinking shears because we don't often have a chance to use them. So I'm going to trim those backs, and then we'll be folding over and securing it down. But I'm just going to get my pinking shears and trim off those bits. Right, so we've reduced that seam down a little bit, which is going to make it so much easier to fold that over. So I'm going to go and press that. So they're all pressed over, and now I'm going to secure. Now the way I do it, you can either stitch in the ditch along here. Now that's good for some things, but to be honest, it's hit and miss with me whether I actually get it to get in the ditch. And there's always the little stitches that go up and below and whatever. So I'm going to just put a top stitch, do a narrow line of stitching just on this edge, like I have done here, because it doesn't matter, and I think that can look neater sometimes than trying to stitch in the ditch and missing. And of course what it will do, as long as you press that down so it's below the stitching line here, it's going to catch in this edge before. So I'm going to go and do that now. I've sewn these, as you can see. I did a pretty good job of that. I did it actually without my reading glasses, so that was a miracle. And as you can see, it looks kind of smarter than trying to stitch in the ditch and go wrong. We're going to put those two pieces aside for the moment now, and we're going to concentrate on the top. So if I tuck that tissue in, you can see kind of what we're going to work on. We want to have the right side facing up of the main fabric. If you can see, what I've done is actually pressed it. So I've folded it in half and pressed it, and folded it in half that way and pressed it. And now I've got my center point, and I've also got this lovely pressed line here. I've done the same with the contrasting fabric. So I'm going to put right sides together for now. And I'm going to fold this in half, and I'm going to line that fold to that fold, and I'm going to flip it over so the center points are in the same place. The reason we can't just match up the edges is, of course, the contrasting fabric is slightly bigger than the main fabric, and you'll understand why when we flip it. But I've got the two lines mixed up and the center point mixed up there, and I'm going to just put a couple of pins to secure that so it doesn't shift around. I've got a ruler here, and what I'm going to do is measure. I'm going to put the 2-inch marker in the center, and I'm going to draw a line 2 inches either side, so that line's going to be 4 inches long with the 2 in the center. Yes, I know I'm going to use a pencil, but it's not going to matter because you won't see it. But I'm hoping it'll make it easier for you to see. So that's a 4-inch line there. I'm going to measure each side of these lines 1/8 of an inch, so that's not much at all, either side. Plus, when I did it 1/4 of an inch, it was just too big. I'll put mark in the centre as well. This is again one of the reasons I'm not doing it in metric. So I'm going to draw a line. So what it's going to create is a type of long rectangle which we will be sewing around. So there we go. So you should have something that resembles that. What we're going to do now is we are going to stitch along this outside line to make it like a little letterbox. So obviously you've got right sides together and we're going to stitch around there. I have stitched around as shown. One thing I must say is when you're going across the right angle, count the number of stitches it takes you to get to the next line. And remember that, because when you do the other one, you know then that that rectangle is going to be the same size. It's not going to skew out. Obviously it depends on your stitch length. I've got quite a big stitch length on here, but yeah, count how many stitches it took to get up to that other line. So, and remember it so you know that both sides are going to be exactly equal. Next is the scary bit. We are going to cut this line. Now, you don't have to be too accurate here, but I'm just going to draw some diagonal lines either side, because I'm going to cut along and then I'm going to cut into the corners both sides. Obviously be careful you don't go over the stitching, but if you do, it doesn't matter. You can just re-stitch it. You can re-stitch it just slightly on the outside. Don't worry about it, it's not a problem. So I'm just going to slit here and then cut into the corners. So I've got to find myself a good sharp pair of scissors. Look, they match almost orange. So I just do a little pinch in the centre. I'm going to cut along the line I made and carefully cut into the corners, making sure I don't do the stitches, but like I said to you, it doesn't matter. Anything can be rectified. And again, cut into there. You can see I did it slightly short on that one, but it doesn't matter. I'm going to undo the pins, and this is the clever bit. We are going to push that through to the outside. So we're going to poke it through the hole. This is how you do bound buttonholes and things like that. It's something I learnt when I was making lots of scrubs back in the COVID era. I loved that process and I still do. I think it makes a lovely touch, and I use it on pyjamas and things like that for the cord to go through. Right, so as you can see, we have this shape here. You've got two options from here and both of them absolutely fine. You can just top stitch around the slit. Now, I did that on the very first one I made, and that is perfectly adequate. Obviously, you will then need to trim out the sizing when you sew them together. But what I'm going to do now is, I have to say, a little bit fiddly, but how I created these little lips on here, as I say, it is fiddly, but what you want to do is pinch about eighth of an inch. I'm going to finger press it for now, so it just covers over half of the slit we've made when we cut it. So that's about an eighth of an inch on one side. We've got lots of room to play with here, so we don't need to worry too much. That's covering half, and I've finger pressed that for now. I'm just going to have a peep and see what it looks like on the outside. That may be too much, I may have to bring it down a bit. So this is fiddly, I will admit, but it's fun, it's fun. So I'm going to turn around the other side and do exactly the same. I'm going to just pinch it a little bit in so those folds meet, and again so the folds meet, so we can't see our way through at all. As I say, it's only about an eighth of an inch, and I'm going to finger press that for now before I pin it and decide that it looks okay from the other side, because I have done them and it's not been quite even, so that's much better. And obviously once we top stitch around the outside, that's going to look pretty good. So not too bad at all. I need a little tweaking, but I'm quite happy with that. This one that I did before wasn't too perfect either, but you can't tell once you've got the tissues coming through. Fine. But if you're a perfectionist, then you can fiddle with that to your heart's content. But once I've got the orange stitching around the outside, I think that's going to be pretty good. I am going to go and press this now so it stays, and obviously press these folds together. And I'm going to top stitch around the outside. If you were doing a proper bound buttonhole, this is when you would sew underneath, but I'm not. I like top stitching, and I like top stitching to show, so I'm going to go around the outside now. There we have it, top stitch around the outside, and I did as I did on the inside, is I counted how many stitches it would take to go around those corners. Now, ever keeping it real I am, look what the iron decided to do. It decided to drop some bits of iron remains on that slit. But I'm not going to worry about it. This is for purpose of demonstration. Just like to keep it real that these things do happen. So there we go. What you can do is, I think what I'm going to do is actually just put some basting stitches across each end, machine basting stitches, just to keep those folds together. I'm now just going to remove the pins and any black dots lying around. I do find them everywhere, these black dots. Now, as you can see, these aren't quite matching up, but that's fine. I'll sort that out when I come to go around the outside. So now the great bit, you've done that bit. We're going to put right sides together, and we are going to place these two portions we made, the back either side. Now, you can put your, obviously one is going to show more than the other, so put your best one on the outside. Mine are about equal actually, so I'm going to make sure that goes on the outside and that one on the inside. So I would line up the main fabric pieces. So I'm just going to pin that, pin or clip, whatever you fancy. Making sure the corners are vaguely level. As okay, we can trim all that off in a minute, so it doesn't matter that our edges aren't all even. I just want to make sure the main fabric lines up. And I'm going to put a pin on these two folds to keep them together. Sometimes I clip, sometimes I pin, changes what I'm doing. So what we're going to do now is sew 1/4 inch all the way around, or it can be slightly more because this is slightly oversized for tissue. So you've got room for error because you just want to make sure you're catching in all those edges. So all the way around, as I say, I'm going to do 1/4 inch, maybe a little bit more. And then we're nearly done. Having sewn all the way around, we need to finish these raw edges. You can either use the overlocker or a serger if you have one to go all the way around. You can zigzag, you can use pinking shears, however you want to finish it, you can. I've used 3-step zigzag, that's another favourite. This one I overlocked, but what we've got to remember is you're not going to see those edges anyway. The most important thing is we get these corners sharp. So I'm going to trim off the corners now. I don't tend to do it square on like that. I scoop in on an angle. Now I saw that somewhere and I can't remember why, but I find it does make a nicer corner than just going square. Makes it less harder edges. So as I say, I'm going to scoop in, very careful not to cut the stitching, but at the end of the day, you can always go back and add a few extra stitches. It's not the end of the world. I know there are a few of you that are going to look an absolute horror what I do, but I've kept these threads so you can see what I do. I put it in the serger, and when I get to an end, I keep going. I lift the foot, turn it round and go down the other side. And I do get these ears that I have to cut off. I don't worry about that. You can do however you want, but for the purpose of just a tissue holder, I'm not going to worry about ends coming unravelled because it doesn't have to be that secure anyway. But that's how I do my corners. And as I said, some of you will cry at that, I am sure. Right, I'm going to take off those stickers. Now we get the fun bit, popping it through the other side. So I'm going to go and get my point turner to make sure these points are nice and neat. I can't find my favourite point turner at the moment. It's lost somewhere in my sewing room from when I did all the moving around, but I'm just going to use this. I can't remember what this is called. It kind of marks things for quilting. Don't you love this bit? This is a bit when you get to see it in for the first time, what you've created in reality. I never get bored of this bit, turning something inside out. So there we have it. It needs a good press, obviously, but everything looks really nice. Corners aren't too bad at all. I did think about whether you could top stitch around this, but what I thought then, maybe it may not be as easy to get the tissues in, so I haven't for now, but I am going to nicely press all these seams. There we go, all nicely pressed, pretty nice, apart from where my iron dumped some stuff on. Now we need to just put some tissues in. The easiest way I found this to actually just open the box of tissues, because we want to keep them exactly how they are folded. Now, so I'm going to take about half, I would imagine. It can be as much as you want. And gently pull them out and keep it all nice and folded. And we just need to slot them in, trying to keep them as neat as we can and as flat as we can. So that they will still pull out exactly how they're meant to. There we go. Now I just need to pull out the top one without breaking it, which happens anyway. There we go. Perfect. Now I can put that in the glove box of my car rather than trying to battle with a box which all gets all crumpled and bashed around. It looks nicer than that anyway, doesn't it? All done.